police, a woman was shot and killed searching for her cheating husband. Now, we brought you this story. It's breaking news. This was yesterday morning. Police say 42-year-old Keiona Wilson was found shot inside a car. It was just outside the Madison Police Precinct. Investigators tell us she was actually shot inside a home on Scalf Drive. Investigators say she went to the home looking for her husband, who was in a relationship with another woman. Police say she got into an argument with the other woman, then tried to force her way into the house. That's when the woman shot Wilson in the stomach, according to police. Wilson drove away, flagged down an officer outside the precinct. She later died at the hospital. So far, no charges have been filed.
On August 25th, 2025, a car rolled quietly onto Scalf Drive, a residential street in Nashville. The driver, 42-year-old Keiona Wilson, parked, retrieved a spare key, and moved a second vehicle from behind a modest house to the front driveway. The house belonged to Keosha Greer. A knock on Greer's front door was met not by an open door, but by a calm voice of a home surveillance system speaker. "He's not here." Seconds later, a gunshot through the storm door. No one struck. The entry was forced. Inside, a physical struggle commenced. A second fatal gunshot followed. Wilson emerged badly wounded, stumbled to the car she had moved, Greer's partner's vehicle, and drove to the nearest police precinct. She flagged down an officer. She was rushed to Skyline Medical Center. Hours later, she was declared dead. On Scalf Drive, the house stands still. Inside, unanswered questions, hidden truths.
Watch it! Watch that light before she go in! No, come on! Look, your goddamn foot. Y'all seen that? Boom! That's when she was hit. She found it, went in there, and found her, and she ran out, realizing she was hit. Watch it! Watch that light before she go in! No, come on! Look, your goddamn foot. Look, your foot. I'm not gonna play with you. Y'all seen that? Boom! That's when she was hit. She found it, went in there, found her, and she ran out, realizing she was hit.
Stay with us as we unravel this shocking story and uncover the heartbreaking details of what led to this senseless loss. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you're watching from and what are your thoughts as the story unfolds. Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. These are real people, real events, real consequences. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. Keiona Denise Wilson was 42 years old. Public records and available reports identify her by name and age and describe her as employed in a property management role. Her employment is listed with a municipal housing authority, indicating a professional background in property oversight and tenant relations. Her daily routine, as reported in public notices and local coverage, included work responsibilities consistent with property management and activities outside work that were described in obituary notices. Family connections reported in public notices list a spouse and children among her immediate survivors and identify parents and siblings among extended family. Those notices also enumerate personal interests and domestic responsibilities that framed her role within her household. The combination of employment and family roles suggests a life structured around both professional duties and family obligations. Family history and key relationships referenced in public material indicate an established marital relationship and at least 2 identified children. The marital relationship is central to the incident under review. Statements from law enforcement and local coverage reference marital tension as a motivating factor for the events that followed. Publicly available material identifies the presence of a husband and notes contact between a husband and another adult female prior to the incident. These relationships provide the immediate social context for the confrontation that resulted in Wilson's death. Length of marriage and legal status. Public accounts reference Wilson as married at the time of the incident. Reports identify her as the spouse of the male party whose presence at a residence prompted the confrontation. Specifics about the duration of the marriage, formal separation agreements, or pending legal actions related to marital status are not included in initial public reports. Such details will require access to court records or direct statements from involved parties. At the time of the confrontation, she is described in reporting and official statements as the husband's wife. Nature of relationship with husband. Reporting indicates a husband was involved in a separate intimate relationship described in law enforcement releases as a dating partnership. That relationship is the proximate cause of the confrontation. Wilson allegedly believed the husband to be present at a residence where the other woman was staying or present. The characterization of the husband's relationship with the other woman, as described to investigators and in local reporting, frames the incident as arising from suspected infidelity or an intimate conflict. Last known marital interactions before incident. Public statements do not provide a full chronology of the immediate domestic exchanges prior to the confrontation. What is reported is that Wilson located the husband's vehicle at the residence and used a spare key associated with the vehicle, after which she approached the residence and engaged with the occupant through a home communication system. There is no public record in initial reporting of a formal prior communication immediately preceding her arrival that evening, such as a recorded phone call between Wilson and her husband immediately before she went to the residence. Confirmation of any such exchanges would require subpoenaed phone records or direct testimony. What may have prompted direct confrontation? The proximate trigger reported was the discovery of the husband's vehicle at the residence. The presence of the vehicle appears to have led Wilson to travel to the address to confront the occupant about the husband's whereabouts. The action of using a spare key to move the vehicle from behind the residence to the front indicates purposeful behavior rather than accidental presence, which aligns with deliberate decision to confront. Signs of heightened emotional distress or desperation. Public accounts document the choice to approach a private residence at night and confront the occupant directly, actions consistent with a high level of urgency or emotional investment. Specific clinical assessments or pre-existing mental health disclosures are not part of the public record. Any determination of psychological state beyond observed behaviors at the scene would require medical or psychiatric records or witness testimony about prior behavior patterns. Documented prior incidents or actions showing increasing concern. Initial reporting does not cite prior police reports, restraining orders, or documented domestic disputes involving Wilson and her husband. Absence of publicly available prior incident records and media coverage does not confirm their non-existence. Comprehensive investigation should include checks of police call logs, civil court filings, and communications records to establish whether a pattern of prior concern existed. Available reporting identifies the other woman involved in the altercation as the occupant of the residence. Public coverage includes an identified name in some reports and describes her role in the incident as the person who engaged via the home speaker system, discharged a firearm through the storm door, and later fired another shot during a physical altercation. Approximate age and employment details are not consistently reported in initial releases. Such specifics require additional public records checks or direct interviews. Resident status of property. Public accounts indicate the woman was present in the residence at the time of the incident. Whether she was a legal occupant, tenant, homeowner, or guest is not specified in early reports. Lease agreements or property records would clarify her legal status at that address. Known or alleged relationship with a husband. Law enforcement statements describe the woman as the husband's dating partner. That designation indicates an ongoing intimate relationship with a husband that is central to motive and context. The length and nature of that relationship, including whether it was public or private, requires verification through communications, witness statements, or corroborating testimony. Employment, reputation, lifestyle. Initial reporting does not detail her employment or broader lifestyle. Those aspects can be established through public records, social media, and interviews conducted during investigation. Was she a legal occupant? No public record in initial reporting confirms lease or ownership status. Access to property records and tenancy documentation is necessary to determine whether she held legal rights to occupy the residence. Access to firearm, registered, permitted, or unregistered. Public accounts report that the woman fired shots during the incident. Whether the firearm was registered or carried under a legal permit is not specified in initial releases. Firearm registration records, permit checks, and police evidence logs will be the sources to establish legal status of the weapon. Possible motive to defend home. The sequence described, speaker engagement, defensive gunfire through a door, and subsequent fatal shot during an altercation, fits a self-defense narrative that can be asserted by an occupant who perceives an imminent threat. Determination of motive requires analysis of statements, physical evidence, and contextual communications. Potential knowledge of wife's identity and relationship. Available reporting indicates the occupant engaged verbally through the speaker system and referenced the husband's presence. This suggests awareness of conflict related to the husband, but does not specify prior knowledge of Wilson specifically beyond immediate recognition at the scene. Possible prior tension or warnings exchanged. Initial reports do not document prior exchanges or warnings between parties. Investigation should include text records, call logs, and witness interviews to establish whether prior communication or warning occurred. Age and employment. Early reports identify him as the spouse of Wilson and the partner of the occupant. Specific age and employment details are not consistently published in initial accounts. Verification requires public records or direct reporting. Previous marital issues. Public reporting frames the incident as arising out of a relationship between the husband and the occupant, but does not detail a formal history of marital dispute filings or documented interventions. Court records and police logs should be examined to determine prior documented issues. Documented presence at house previously. The husband's vehicle was found at the residence on the night of the incident, which served as a catalyst for Wilson's visit. Whether there is a pattern of prior visits or presence at the residence is not established in initial reports and requires cell phone geolocation data or witness testimony to confirm. Communications, calls, text public releases do not provide full communication logs. Subpoenaed phone records are necessary to establish frequency and timing of communications between the husband and the occupant. Length of dating partner relationship. Reports describe a relationship as a dating partnership, but do not quantify its duration. Social media, communications, and witness accounts could define its time frame. Was he aware Wilson might confront the situation? Early reporting does not indicate prior notice. Investigation should determine whether the husband informed either party of expected meetings or otherwise contributed to conditions that led to the confrontation. Whether he enabled conditions leading to the confrontation. Public detail that his vehicle and a spare key were present suggests physical elements that enabled Wilson's approach and entry. Whether these factors were knowingly provided is unestablished in initial reports and should be explored through interviews and records. Below is a direct, detailed, and unemotional reconstruction of events and related procedural elements based on the outline you provided. It covers the minute-by-minute timeline, emergency response, and forensic/technical evidence points you listed. At an estimated time in the late evening, Keiona learned that her husband might be at a specific residence. The discovery window is defined by the last confirmed contact with him, and by phone/location, records that can be pulled. From that point, she departed alone and followed a direct route to property. The travel path is relevant. GPS traces or cell tower pings will show the precise route and the time of departure, which establishes how long she had to act and whether she made any stops en route. Arriving unaccompanied indicates there was no immediate third-party witness from her side at the scene and reduces possibility of deliberate ambush involving accomplices. It also frames the encounter as a one-on-one confrontation rather than a group escalation. The time of arrival is the first fixed point in the reconstruction because it can be corroborated by surveillance video, vehicle telematics, or witness statements. On arrival, she observed a vehicle behind the home identified as her husband's. She used a spare key to move that vehicle from the rear to the front of the property. The use of the car key establishes she had access to the husband's property or vehicle, which can be verified with manufacturing records, which key fits which car, testimony regarding possession of the spare key, and any fingerprints on the vehicle. Moving the car is significant for two reasons. It demonstrates knowledge of the vehicle's location and indicates an assertion control over the husband's property. Whether this action indicates prior knowledge of a hidden parking arrangement depends on statements and prior patterns. If the car's rear parking was irregular, moving it suggests she recognized it as associated with the husband and intended to make it visible or remove it from concealment. The first contact was a knock at the front door. The occupant responded through a home surveillance speaker rather than opening the door. The recorded exchange, if available, should be transcribed verbatim to establish tone, intent, and claims of presence or absence. A reconstructed transcription would show call and response timestamps, the exact words used on both sides, and any commands or warnings issued. The speaker response reportedly included denial that the husband was inside. This denial is a key factual claim to be verified against phone or location evidence. The mode of communication, via speaker, created a physical barrier that shaped subsequent events and determined how each party assessed threat and credibility. After the speaker exchange, Keiona attempted to force entry. The reasons for forced entry can be assessed through records of prior access rights, urgency implied in voice recordings, and any visible damage at the door. The first shot was fired into the storm door and did not strike Keiona. Ballistics and entry traces from the storm door will show caliber, angle, and whether the door was fired at while closed. A shot through a storm door can be interpreted as either a warning or an escalation. Physical evidence and the sequence of actions that follow will clarify intent. If the first shot was aimed through glass or a closed barrier, trajectory analysis and residue placement can indicate whether the shooter intended to stop progress or to deter entry. The fact that it did not hit the target is a material detail for considering reasonableness of subsequent force. Shortly after the first discharge, Keiona gained entry to the interior. The sequence inside should be reconstructed using surveillance footage, witness testimony, and forensic markers such as disturbed items, blood spatter, and clothing damage. The physical contact sequence begins at the point of entry and ends at the moment of the second discharge. Forensic indicators, locations of blood, transfer of DNA, defensive wounds, and weapon position, will produce a spatial map of the struggle. The second shot struck Keiona in the abdomen, a location that medical reports will document precisely. The shot placement and trajectory will be measured against the positions of both parties during the struggle to estimate relative distance and orientation at the time of discharge. After being shot, Keiona exited the premises despite critical injury. She entered the husband's vehicle and drove a short distance to a police precinct where she flagged down officers. Vehicle telemetry, surveillance footage along the route, and eyewitness observations can confirm exact distance and time driven. The act of driving to precinct while injured provides a timeline for when the shooting occurred relative to her arrival at the station and the 911 or police contact logs. Visual evidence of the self-rescue attempt includes the condition of the car, blood transfer patterns, and the officer's initial observations. The sequence from exit to contact with police establishes the elapsed time between injury and first responder intervention. The location where she flagged an officer and the time of that contact are recorded in police logs. Officers' body-worn camera footage and dispatch records will show the exact time the interaction began, the condition in which she was found, and any spontaneous statement she may have made. If she gave a recorded statement, that audio will be preserved. If not, officers' notes and initial medical observations will document her responsiveness, breathing, bleeding, and level of consciousness. Any direct quotes or last words recorded become primary evidence for investigators. Emergency services response is documented by EMS run sheets, which list dispatch time, arrival time, on-scene treatment, transport time, and destination hospital. Hospital intake records and trauma team notes will indicate interventions performed, vital signs on arrival, imaging results, and the time of death if pronounced in hospital. The official time of death is recorded on the medical certificate and in hospital records and becomes a legal timestamp for investigative chronology. The total number of shots fired is determined from physical evidence at the scene, bullet recovery, and ballistic tests. Entry wound location and trajectory are established by medical examiners using wound mapping and radiographs. Trajectory estimations permit reconstruction of shooter position relative to victim. Distance estimations are informed by stippling patterns, soot deposition, and residue analysis. Recorded video and audio from property surveillance systems, including the initial speaker exchange and interior cameras, provide objective timestamps and frame-by-frame evidence. Synchronizing camera timestamps with dispatch logs and phone records creates a unified timeline. Video integrity checks will confirm whether any footage has been altered or gaps exist. Phone records show calls placed and received, timestamps of messages, and possible geolocation pings. Communications between the parties prior to arrival can indicate prior coordination or warnings. Search history may demonstrate premeditation if queries show route planning, evidence of intent, or phrases suggesting planned confrontation. Tire marks at the scene, forensic impressions, and vehicle telematics, if available, show when the car was moved and the distance driven afterward. Door unlocking logs from vehicle systems or key fob timestamps can corroborate use of the spare key. Forensic analysis of the car interior can show blood transfer patterns and items displaced during the emergency drive. In Tennessee, self-defense is evaluated under Tennessee Code Annotated Section 39-11-611. The statute allows the use of force if a person reasonably believes it is necessary to protect against another's imminent use of unlawful force. Lethal force is only permitted if the threat is perceived as likely to cause serious bodily injury or death. Under the law, the establishment of reasonable belief is based on the suspect's perception at the time of the incident, combined with factual circumstances. Force proportionality is a central concern. The initial gunshot was reported to have been fired through a storm door without striking the victim. This action may be interpreted by prosecutors as a warning shot. However, the second shot, which caused fatal injury during the physical struggle, is subject to scrutiny regarding whether lethal force remained necessary at that moment. The forensic analysis of shot trajectory, distance, and timing relative to the altercation is required to determine proportionality. The Castle Doctrine, applicable in Tennessee, provides legal protection to homeowners using force against someone unlawfully entering their residence. This protection generally applies if the person using force is in a location they have a right to be, and if the person entering does not have permission to enter. It establishes a presumption of reasonable fear if an intruder unlawfully and forcibly enters the home. In this case, investigators assess whether forced entry occurred, whether the victim was legally there, and whether the shooter was aware of any claim of access rights by the victim. Evidence indicates the victim used a key to access and move her husband's vehicle prior to the incident. The key suggests partial access rights to the car, which may support claims of marital property interest. However, possession of a car key does not extend to property rights over the home where the shooting occurred. Tennessee law distinguishes between rights to shared vehicles and unauthorized entry into privately occupied premises. The verbal refusal communicated via home surveillance speaker may legally establish withdrawal of consent for entry, if documented through audio or video. Such refusal may serve as pre-incident notification that entry would be considered unlawful. Investigators must determine whether the victim proceeded to force entry after this denial and whether the occupant reasonably perceived threat upon entry. Voluntary manslaughter may be considered if prosecutors determine the shooter acted intentionally, but under circumstances of adequate provocation. Physical confrontation and perceived threat could constitute such provocation, but verification depends on whether the force used is deemed excessive. Second-degree murder may apply if it is established that the shooter acted knowingly, without legal justification, and with awareness that their actions could result in death. The analysis would involve the timing of the fatal shot, viability of alternative actions, e.g., retreat or call for help, and whether the shooter escalated the encounter. Justified self-defense could be applicable if the shooter demonstrated that the force was used to prevent serious harm from an unlawful intruder. For this defense to stand, investigators must confirm forced entry and immediate threat. Forensic reconstruction of struggle dynamics inside the house will influence this conclusion. The husband's potential indirect involvement is evaluated based on prior knowledge of both relationships and whether his actions contributed to the sequence of events. Questions include whether he knowingly placed his spouse and partner in a position of potential confrontation, and whether any warnings or disputes transpired earlier that could have predicted escalation. Infidelity itself carries no direct legal liability, but if evidence shows that the husband misled either individual, facilitated unauthorized access, or withheld information leading to increased risk, it may factor into civil proceedings, but is unlikely to result in criminal charges unless direct involvement in planning or facilitating the event is proven. Media coverage primarily focuses on three themes: confrontation, infidelity, and self-defense. Typical headlines highlight the forced entry component and the relationship conflict, often emphasizing property owners' right to protection. Coverage varies by region, but commonly references the legality of the shooting and pending investigation. Reports typically note the absence of immediate charges and ongoing involvement of the district attorney's office. News outlets tend to position the incident as a domestic dispute leading to fatal violence. The narrative revolves around ownership of the home, discovery of the husband's vehicle, and the escalation that followed. Some local media reference surveillance technology used during the confrontation, raising interest in digital evidence. Public reactions are divided. Some express support for the principle of home defense, citing legal frameworks surrounding unauthorized entry. Others view the shooting as disproportionate use of force, referencing relational betrayal and emotional distress. Discussions highlight questions of moral versus legal justification. Gender-based arguments emerge, with commentary positioning the victim as a spouse reacting to perceived infidelity. References to wronged wife narratives circulate in public forums, often weighed against legal boundaries of entering private property. These discussions are not legally determinative but influence perception of fairness. Several critical uncertainties remain central to the investigation. Verbal interaction prior to entry, content and tone of speech exchanged through the surveillance speaker, whether this communication included threats, confirmation of husband's presence, or explicit denial of access. Determination of whether the victim responded verbally, and if such response indicated intent to force entry. Prior domestic reports, whether either individual had previously contacted authorities regarding threats, emotional instability, or suspected infidelity. Absence or presence of previous complaints may inform assessments of premeditation or foreseeability. Shooter's intent regarding the first shot, whether the discharge into the storm door was intended as a warning or misguided attempt to deter entry. Investigators must establish if this suggests reluctance to cause lethal harm or escalation. Reason for delayed charges. Following consultation with prosecutorial authorities, no charges were filed immediately. Reasons may include pending forensic analysis, review of home defense statutes, or incomplete evidence from surveillance technology or witness accounts. Knowledge or planning before incident, whether the victim pre-identified the location, tracked husband's location, or acted impulsively. Examination of phone records, routing data, and vehicle movement may reveal whether the confrontation was premeditated. Analyzing the broader context of domestic dispute prevention leads to the question of whether the fatal outcome could have been avoided through earlier intervention. In cases involving marital issues, infidelity, and escalating confrontations, intervention through mediated counseling, legal separation procedures, or third-party involvement could have served as preventative measures. Records of prior disagreements, if available, could indicate opportunities where law enforcement or social support services might have advised cooling off periods or legal protections. Verifiable systems such as restraining orders, separation filings, or mediated warnings could have provided official acknowledgement of tension. If none were in place, the individuals involved may not have utilized available legal safeguards. Identifying whether local authorities had been previously alerted to potential risks, whether any welfare checks had occurred, or whether there was documentation of marital conflict would provide insight as to whether earlier intervention was possible. In similar incidents, law enforcement agencies often recommend proactive measures, including filing of incident reports upon initial signs of domestic instability. Preliminary documentation can serve as a basis for judicial guidance. The absence of recorded disputes may contribute to missed opportunities for targeted preventive actions. Therefore, determining whether the situation had any pre-incident indicators remains a priority for analysis. Actionable preventive measures depend heavily on early reporting, acknowledgement of escalating risks, and structured legal involvement prior to confrontation. The involvement of a surveillance speaker as a primary point of verbal interaction introduces a modern complexity to confrontation dynamics. In traditional disputes, direct physical engagement is more common. Here, the speaker system enabled remote communication, creating a barrier between individuals. This format may have influenced escalation based on perception of distancing versus avoidance. The responding individual's choice to communicate via surveillance speaker instead of opening the door suggests an attempt to manage the confrontation without physical exposure. This limited contact may have contributed to heightened demand for physical access by the approaching party. Understanding the role of the speaker system and determining if audio recordings exist is critical. These recordings may provide exact wording, tone, and sequence of verbal exchanges, contributing to analysis regarding intent, coercion, or perceived threat. Technology platforms are increasingly integrated into home defense mechanisms. However, using speaker systems to engage confrontational scenarios can distort direct communication. It also reduces human perceptual indicators, such as body language, which could either de-escalate or intensify confrontational situations. The availability of that audio data could determine whether the confrontation was invited, refused, or aggravated through remote interaction. The presence of security systems may also indicate whether surveillance footage was captured internally or externally. For comprehensive analysis, retrieval and examination of all recordings linked to the system should be recommended to understand the full role of technology in the exchange. This segment evaluates the point at which emotional reaction to betrayal transitions into legally prosecutable behavior. Domestic legal frameworks generally recognize emotional distress, but do not permit physical retaliation that compromises safety or security. When an individual takes steps beyond legal boundaries to confront another party, escalation may lead to unlawful entry, making them subject to legal consequences regardless of motive. The core legal question centers on whether entering another person's residence after being verbally refused constitutes criminal trespass. Possession of a car key to relocate a vehicle does not automatically imply right of access to the property. When physical entry is attempted without consent, especially after being refused through verbal instruction, it typically falls outside legal authorization regardless of emotional justification. Similarly, the responding party's actions are examined under self-defense laws. The use of lethal force is typically evaluated according to the imminence and severity of perceived threat. If the confrontation escalated to physical force, investigators must assess whether the defensive action aligns with lawful standards of proportional response. In legal terms, emotional hurt does not excuse forced entry, and likewise, emotional discomfort does not validate disproportionate defensive violence. Establishing precise decision points during the confrontation is essential for determining when the situation transitioned from emotional dispute to physical and legal conflict. The conclusion should summarize the sequence of events factually: arrival at a residence, car relocation, interaction via surveillance system, attempted entry, initial and subsequent firearm discharge, self-transport to authorities, hospital transfer, and confirmed death, followed by mention of ongoing investigation and absence of immediate charges. It is notable that multiple decisions made within a narrow time frame resulted in irreversible consequences. Each step, from relocation of the vehicle to physical entry and firearm response, contributed directly to the final outcome. Critical facts remain unsettled, including final verbal exchange inside the residence, intent behind each action taken by both parties, exact timeline segmentation during physical altercation, whether surveillance or digital data can provide definitive clarification. Final legal determinations pending investigation include whether shooting was justified under Tennessee self-defense laws, whether forced entry negates potential immunity under protection doctrines, possible future civil litigation based on wrongful death claim, retrieve complete video and audio capture from external and internal surveillance, including the speaker communication sequence, secure full statements from all involved parties, including responding officers and any potential witnesses, acquire full documentation of the incident report, officer arrival notes, dispatch timestamps, and medical response logs, review cell phone communications, text exchanges, call records, vehicle tracking logs, and any prior digital signs of escalating dispute or premeditated actions. The property stands unchanged. No visible traces reveal the decisions taken within it. The questions remain unchanged in their weight, awaiting resolution. A confrontation intended to deliver personal answers resulted in deeper uncertainty. What was sought in urgency now extends into a broader investigation with outcomes still undefined. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.